that it is a blessing to have been bought here as slaves, but there was a religion before. And the reason that that is important to know is because um, when Black folk became enslaved people, um, within them still resided that faith, because that is the thing that held them through critical and gruesome, cruel, brutal moments in America's original sin. And we see glimpses of that, and we see to understand how we worship today, we absolutely had to know that it was that faith that got them through such a difficult time. So I think in starting that, one of the things that I recognize is just in general, I think what is a common idea that we all understand is that suffering makes us go to God with questions. And I think in those moments is where theology is formed. And so we're gonna talk about theology. I'm gonna try not to jump around because I get excited on this. But it is in the suffering that people become willing and able to ask God hard questions. And when a people of faith are pulled from everything that they know and love into a world where they have lost identity and lost homes and lost family and can lose their life without consequence, they have this thought that they are worthless and that they don't matter, especially when there's absolutely no consequence for the harm that is done. And so then people, how do you hold on in moments like that, in times like that, when people don't care? When you are not, you are seeing, you have gone from celebrating and singing with family and friends to not being considered a person. You are a property who can be sold in a moment. The thing that keeps you through hard moments is faith. The thing that keeps us through hard moments is faith. Somehow, in order to survive, you have to have something that you look forward to, and that is faith. And so African people would be invited to the church of the slave owners, and oftentimes they were told the Paul text. Now, people end up having a whole lot of beef with Paul because of this, because Paul says, slaves, obey your masters. And now I think it was Howard Thurman who says, like, his grandmother always went over that text and said, never read to me Paul anymore. Because, right, like, Paul been on everybody's little hit list because of that text. Now, some people will argue that he evolved, but we won't get there. There's still this underlying beef with Paul. But there was a part of the text that was hidden from the people, but they discovered it anyhow. And that was the book of Exodus, where they found God in the midst of trouble to be a deliverer. And so, and when I mentioned theology, that gets us to this place of theology. And what is the theology that we carry? And we carry the theology of our ancestors, which is that God is a deliverer. So, wait, any thoughts before I proceed?
I'm monitoring the chat. So
Okay.
whatever, if they come up, I got you.
Okay, thank you. All right. So you will then see that. So I don't know. I'm sure some of y'all have been to Black churches. Some of y'all are members of Black churches. I have been in Black churches all of my life. And one thing that is unique about the Black experience is you will hear within the songs them singing to a God that liberates. So there is, if you want to know more about it, and I was going to give resources in the end, but I'll just give it as I go. James Cone discusses liberation theology about God being on the side of the oppressed people. And what I love about that idea, and what I love about what I've seen in enslaved people finding God, or not finding God, but remembering God, I should say, in the midst of difficulty, is what we learn is that God went against what was norm. So slavery was normal within society. And yet we have a people that recognized that even though this is normalized in society and they have rules set up like this, God is saying that this is not how it should be. Now, I would bring that to 2025, but I'm going to put a note there just in case I get to come back. But I need you to remember that, because sometimes God does something that is, God will say what is normal in society is not what I ordained, and he has called some people to change some things. And so that's why slaves could fight their way out. So when we look at the church today and Black spirituality today, that history is foundational. And what is his name? There is a PBS 2-part, 4-hour series that talks about all of this history. I can't give you 4 hours, but you can absolutely go watch it. If I remember the name, I'll tell you in a second, because it's right there, but it's a lot happening right now.
Barburton?
No, it was
It's okay. Keep.
no, you're good. It was okay, I'll find it. Oh, I saw the chat pop up. Who got it?
Rachel says
Oh.
Albert Rabotu.
It was
Several books on this history. Not sure if that's who you were looking for.
no, but I'll take that too.
I'll take it.
I'll put it in the chat in a second.
Tao.
Yeah.
Tao. I might be saying his name wrong.
No, it was done in 2023 PBS special. 2023, 2024. Okay, anyway.
Okay.
So you can watch that if you want to know more about that, but that becomes really imperative for how we worship today. So when you enter into church spaces, our songs in Black church spaces tend to be different.
Mm-hmm.
So when we're singing, because let me just say that when slavery ended, the struggle still did not end. So, there is slavery, and then there's this fight to freedom through the Civil War. And then after that, we get Jim Crow. So there are all these historical, intentional means of oppression that we are constantly fighting through. And so while the slave people, they created their own churches and they worshiped in what was called hush harbors, because they would be punished for their worship. And so they worshiped in hush harbors. But it was a place of liberation. So they sang songs that were actually secret messages on how to escape slavery.
Yeah, I forgot about that.
Right?
Was it called The Black Shirts? This is our story. This is our song. Henry Louis Gates.
That was-
Henry Louis Gates.
Yep. So Henry Louis Gates has a 2-part, about 4 hours altogether.
That's what it says.
It's PBS.
Yes, PBS.
Yes.
Okay.
So you can get it on Amazon Prime.
Okay.
So you can watch that, and that'll help you if you want to know more about that part. And I hope I'm not redundant, but that part is just really important to how we function, because that liberation, that fight for liberation, is what got them to resist the norm of slavery and say this should not be. And so they left there. And when we get into Jim Crow and again dehumanization, and saying you don't belong here, you don't deserve to drink out of a fountain, you don't deserve to go to our schools, you don't deserve equal treatment, you also see the church become at the forefront of the fight, because the church understood that God is a God that seeks liberation and that God sees everybody as human. And so you often see the church rise to that fight. And so we shall overcome someday, that song that we often sing. Or if we could go back to like James Brown, I'm Black and I'm proud. All of these things that came to empower us and strengthen us and push us forward in a world that was difficult. And so you often see Black spirituality turn into resistance towards a culture or a society that says that oppress. And so fast forward to the church.
Mm-hmm.
You see that in our worship. That's where I was going. You see that in our worship services. So when we sing and we sing the Black hymns, if you listen to the lyrics of the Black hymns, it is very different than CCM music. CCM music is beautiful, and I love my little worship songs. And there's also within Black church this cry, this plea, right? So I was listening to Reckless Love recently. And it's like, oh, this overflowing, never-ending, reckless love of God that chases me down, fights till I'm found, this reckless love of God. And while I was sitting there, the song that I paired it to was Pass Me Not.
Oh, wow.
Right? Like, these are two very different songs. This one song that says, God is chasing me. God is not going to give up on me. Me and God are homies forever. And this other song that is pleading with God to not overlook me in this space of suffering, in this world filled with trouble, in this moment of despair where I can't seem to win, where every time we make a step forward, there seems to be 4 steps back or 10 steps back. There's always this seeming struggle, and you will often hear that in the songs within the Black church. You'll often hear that within the preaching of Black church. There is what I have learned from my pastor is like this, the antithesis is what they present in the beginning of a sermon. This friction, what is contrary to the scripture, like Romans 8:28, that tells us about how God will never stop loving us. And yet we have all of these challenging things in life that makes us feel like Christ on the cross that said, why have you forsaken me? And somehow in the midst of all of that trouble, we have to somehow find God. And so within the sermon, you'll see a preacher often present that hardness in the beginning, because we can't do church without doing the issues that are in society that are impacting the people of the church. But you'll see within those sermons is that there is a build, and there is a build to hope. So then usually, now it's not that the Black church is not a monolith, but you will begin to see this celebration moment to people who came in after the world had beat them up. And at the end, they are standing and shouting, and they feel so much stronger because they have been empowered by the word of God to keep going another day. And so they find God again to be a liberator. And no matter the distressing moment, because, okay, here's the thing. Because one of the things I think, and I don't know if you would agree, like sometimes the situation doesn't necessarily change in the moment. And I think oftentimes when we think of faith, we think of having faith in a God that makes all things better. And better may be coming, but like the psalmist said, how long, Lord? And sometimes it is a journey. And to hold on when freedom is 400 years from now, to hold on, and the Israelites, same thing, hundreds of years, and to hold on requires a faith that knows that one day God will deliver.
And it's almost like to hold on while I'm working, right? And so every celebration we have, we try to make sure that everybody, while we're celebrating this one specific culture, race, people, that we also try to make sure that everybody else feels included in some type of way. And I think that's the purpose of the spiritual one. And we always do it at the end. And there's so many things that you said, but that's one thing that stood out to me that I keep hearing, we play over and over again, is that even though, Black folks went through slavery, God was working in the midst of that to deliver a people. And he used the civil rights movement. He used Harriet Tubman. He used all these things to slowly open doors, because in the background, yes, Black folks were super duper enslaved, but we weren't the only ones. You had women, white women who didn't have a voice, who wasn't recognized. And you had folks that were gay for years who were scared to come out. So you had all these super oppressed people, but there was one group of people that was known no matter what, that you walk in the door, you're Black, I can tell, and you're easier to oppress, you're easier to target. So we're going to use you as an example. And so that's so funny. And it's so much like God to say, okay, you're going to use that people. I'm going to use that people as well to open these, to work through this and open these doors and to make things better. Now, it took a long time, and we kind of questioned God, like, well, it's taking a whole lot of people died, Lord.
Yeah.
How long?
I think what I'm hearing too, Tosh, that I love about being able to celebrate our history is that you said something about the struggle.
Yeah.
And I love the comparison of the songs of almost like that audacity that God is looking for me. how bold am I to know that the Lord of all lords is looking for little old Jada? To be able to claim that. And yet on the other side of that, in the Black church, we're pleading for God to come and not leave us. I think the through line there about those two experiences, that the struggle, that no matter what color, gender, place, money, mind, that we all have a struggle
Yeah.
that is seen by God.
Yeah.
And I
Absolutely.
love that. And that's one of the things that I think being in the Black churches that gives us this refreshment is that we're bold with our struggle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We got no choice.
We don't have
no choice. We have no choice.
we've been on that struggle bus. It ain't new. And that God is still fighting with us on it.
Yeah.
And so when I hear you say that and you think about the scriptures and the journey that Black folks have tripped through, Hispanics have tripped through a journey.
Yeah.
Native Americans have tripped. I listened to the story about immigration. The first immigration story was from an Asian guy. That's where the law came into play. So I think about the story of those communities, and yet we all have had that same struggle.
Yeah.
And God is still with us. So I get excited.
No.
I want to see if anybody has anything to say. You can put it in the chat, or you can unmute yourself before we go. Let Taj proceed.
Oh, stuff is here.
Yeah.
Okay. You got about 2 minutes.
You helped you.
Actually, you got about 60 seconds. You want to help her, Richard?
I mean, all the sites, there's quite a bit.
Okay. We're good. All right. Go ahead, Taj.
Okay. Sure. So I think when we think about spirituality, I think one of the things that, well, as the Jada just said, when we talk about like the suffering and the struggle, that it transforms our theological thought. And those hard moments are the moments in which we can go to God and say, God, what do you say about this? And how God can be go contrary to what is a societal norm. And I will also add that, so we talked about within the worship service and within the preaching, you often hear this discussion of liberation. And what I touched on, but I will also want to share is like this idea that it also impacts the work we do in the community, because then our theology kind of evolves into the community work and it meets the deficits of society. So the deficits of society. And so when we think about how Lawndale Christian Health Center is seeking to meet the needs of the injustice that is happening in the world, and how we are providing healthcare, and even in this moment where there is some concern with Medicaid, how FQHC will rise up and serve those who are uninsured. That is a byproduct of the church, and a byproduct of theology, and a byproduct of recognizing or defining who God is to the quote unquote least in society, to those who are marginalized, to those who are oppressed. We see God show up and say, this is not how society should be. This is not what I intended it to be. Then often you see that the church is filling the gaps. And so I'm sure that some of y'all are in churches that fill the gaps and do the work and help to meet some kind of need within society when society fails the people that are most marginalized in society. So if you want to share some of the work that your church has done in the community to help shape and change the injustices in the world, That'll be cool. Y'all gotta unmute though because Nicole left and I don't know how to know how to work the screen. Um, so if anybody wants to share, or you can put it in the chat, the work that your church has done or is doing to impact the world. Listening. Okay. I don't see anything. Um,
Hey, Todd.
hey,
There isn't. I don't think there's anything in the chat yet. Oh, something just got added.
okay, thank you. Okay.
I would say being raised in the Catholic Church has a strong focus on justice and service that I've appreciated. And since leaving the Catholic Church, most of my churches have been Black churches. So, so I
Love
can't.
it.
So, but yeah, so I would say that's the other place that I saw it is that like that acting for the least of these is part of our faith and part of what is expected of us in our faith has been with me since I was an infant. So
Thanks for sharing, Kristen. You want to read them?
Yeah.
So the question that is on the table is how, like, so part of building on this idea of our theology and how it impacts our faith and how it shows up in our worship, but also how our church responds to that theology that God is the God of the oppressed, and how have our churches responded to injustice and stuff in society. So people are just sharing that.
Okay, so Eva said outside of the Black churches I haven't really seen this. I think it's a big area of growth for all churches, but especially PWIs, and that's predominantly white churches. Lionel says, my church collaborate with Hope Worldwide in foreign countries and tragic events in the U.S. that occur. Raul says, addressing street violence with peacekeepers, violence prevention, outreach, and even grief groups for victims of street violence. And then Lionel also added, my church collaborate with an organization on the west side that works with youth as well.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
You know, I wonder, wherever's with her comment, because we always say it's 2025 and you know, we know and these things have happened and we're just so far off in our years and things should be better. And I think Saju and I were talking last night and I was thinking this was a lingering thought for me as far as PWIs, predominantly white churches. I'm always confused and I'm always challenged with the thought of God is a God of everything and everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And so what impacts one directly impacts us all indirectly. So I'm always just curious how, whether you're a part of the culture, whether you're Black, white, whatever, if something is happening to a human being, how can we not feel that? How can we not discuss that? How can we not just want to know more and talk about it more? Or, you know, because I've been to predominantly white churches as well, and I know that they're not going to get down like a Baptist church. I know that, and I'm with it. And the worship still be good because I'm open to all different types of ways to worship and hear and serve and
all those things. But I have to admit, whatever, I've been to predominantly white churches, and it's just such a disconnect, you know? And I don't know. I pray about that because I'm like, God, at some point, we're all going to have to come together. At some point, that disconnect cannot be if we're going to move forward. And that's probably why we're not where we should be or where we think we should be, because there's still such a huge disconnect there. And I still don't get that.
You know, to be honest, I remember when I first came to Lawndale, even as a Black person, when I first came to Lawndale, if I can tell my story,
You good, Eva?
I sat with Pastor Brooks once, and had a conversation, and he just asked me a simple question. He was saying, I don't know, Tosh, how your work at Lawndale correlates with the church that you go to, because I was at a church that was mostly prosperity theology.
Mhm.
And that was kind of the church I had been at for a really long time. And I really think that one of the things that helped to evolve my theological thought was actually, and this is another word that I hear my pastor say, but it's proximity and your nearness to people in their suffering. Because I think that when we are separate, it can feel like we are not interconnected. I
Mhm.
think, one of the things that I learned is like COVID taught us that we are all connected.
Yes.
Because something that was in a whole nother country impacted us here, and it spread all over. And if nothing else, like it was definitely traumatic, but it was also a reminder that we are all connected. And I think that in partnership, and in being in an intentional partnership to say, I want to know more about your story, I want you to know more about mine, I think that we can learn to partner better. But in isolation, we don't really see the struggles of people. And so I think learning, me, who went to DC for 5 years and came back and didn't really understand why God was calling me to Lawndale, had a complete transformation in my theological thinking by being with people that were suffering, and being with them. I then saw how it related to my suffering. And that actually got me better, got me to, all where I am today. But I think it's in proximity. I think it's in being intentional about walking with people and knowing their stories and not shying away from suffering. And here's a big one, not solely saying that someone else's suffering is a result of something that God wants to do.
Mhm.
Because I think we can excuse suffering and we can be apathetic towards somebody's suffering when we only conclude that their suffering is because of their sin or their mess, and it has nothing to do with the systems of society.
But I think a lot of people come to Lawndale, a lot of providers, a lot of people come to Lawndale and want to work in this community because they love the work that we're doing, they love the mission and things like that. But if you're not from here, you're not from here, and you have not been engulfed in like the Blackness that's surrounded here, it can become overwhelming. And it can almost be easier to say, you know what, I'm just going to go to work and do my job because this is a lie. So I wonder with those who struggle with it. Like people that are not from this community. It's like, sometimes you'll go visit
like
a place.
compassion fatigue.
Yes, you'll go visit a place like, oh, I love it there and it's great and I believe in this mission and man, this is somewhere I want to be. And then you pack up and you move and you get there because you got to remember you were on there for a couple of days. So it was great while you were there for a couple of days because you were able to go back home. And now this is your home and this is where you are. And it's just overwhelming. Like this is a lot. I have immersed myself because that's what CCDA is about. I've immersed myself into this community, into this culture, into this mission. And whoa, it's a lot. So it's easier to say, you know what? I'm gonna connect with the group of people that I'm gonna connect with, and then even though I'm in this community and I'm living in it, I'm gonna stay right here with my group of people that I'm comfortable with and I know. I'm gonna go to the church, back to the church that I know, and then I'm gonna go home.
Got it.
You know what I'm saying?
The discomfort that it requires.
Yes.
It requires some form of discomfort to Yeah, I get what you're
You
saying.
know what I'm saying?
It's sometimes easy to go back to what you know.
Exactly.
You know the people that go back to those relationships that they know they're not supposed to go back to.
It's toxic, but I know this toxic. I know how this feels, you know, so I'd rather just be here and be comfortable in this. And I think that's a real challenge. I think that's a real challenge for other cultures. I think that's a real challenge even for Black folks who weren't raised in the same area that we were raised in. Black folks who was raised in the suburbs and were only around, you know, other cultures except for their own, to get here and be like, oh no, this is where I'm supposed to be. And you're like, wait, Lord, this is a lie. I can't handle this. What am I supposed to do? And how am I supposed to handle this? This is so off course, but I hear stories. I see people struggling from day to day. And so that's why I brought it up.
Yeah, and then that's gonna require more than the 60 seconds that we got.
Yeah.
But I will remind y'all of a CCDA principle that like is so important, and it is just listening. I think one of the things when I came to Lawndale 16 years ago is that there was this expectation of God calling me to evangelize, and in my time here, I've had to learn that it looks different.
Yeah.
And I've had to learn to sit and I'm not I tell medical people that like I'm not the expert in the room.
Mm-hmm.
Like my patients sometimes are much more knowledgeable to me, even about the community. I haven't lived in North Lawndale in a long time. And so even certain things, I have to sometimes not be the expert in the room and not be the healer in the room and just be like, let God do whatever God wants to do, because I realize that those connections with the patients become transformational. But it starts with just me listening and learning people's stories. And even in the discomfort, I think sometimes the discomfort can lead you to purpose if you really lean into it. Because I think a lot of the big movements that happened in society were people in discomfort and listening to people's stories and saying, this shouldn't be. And what more do we need? I think we can think probably that's how SUD clinic came about, right? These overdoses and stuff that are happening. It is hard to see somebody overdose. It is hard to see these stories and see these people in these broken families and then say next patient. That is really difficult. And then in that discomfort of Lawndale leaning into it, SUD forms, right? So not running away from it and going back to everything that's comfortable that doesn't leave you tossing and turning at night, because sometimes that tossing and turning in that discomfort is God actually trying to do a change in you. And so listening is listening to the patient, listening to the community, but also listening to what God is speaking, because change comes in the discomfort.
Yeah.
If we only seek comfort, we will not grow in our theological thinking. We will not grow deeper in our passions and concerns for the community, and we will not grow in the ministry as we grow. Once I heard them say we don't want to grow wider, we want to grow deeper.
Yeah.
And that deepness is really in the discomfort.
Christian said, Roadmap to Reconciliation by Dr. Brennan Salter.
Absolutely. Come on, Christian.
Helps to explain that cycle that Nicole commented on. And I love this. She says, I have to have a connection to the pain. And it's funny because you ended it with that. I have to have a connection to the pain that I see in order to be willing to engage with it and not walk away from it. So that's good. I like the women in the room. I know, it's like, Christian, that was so good. And even you connect to it, but she paired it with in order even to be willing.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? Because you can see it and you connect, but then empathy. So even be willing to connect to it. So Kristen, I love it. That was good.
Yeah. We end on Kristen. No,
we gonna end with Kristen. Oh wait, we got one more. We gonna end with Jeffrey.
Hold on to Kristen though.
Jeffrey said 100% agree with Taj's word on proximity, CCDA values. I see incarnational ministry as the key. I'm a white guy from the suburbs originally. I attended a bunch of mainline evangelical churches growing up. In those contexts, I have seen tons of faithful followers of Jesus looking for creative ways to live out their faith, often serving the least of these. At the same time, I have seen tons of blind spots in predominantly white suburban churches as well. Much of my life has been characterized as a reaction to that
that sheltered upbringing. It is incredibly easy to get absorbed in our geographic bubble. As a family, we have decided to make our bubble amidst the physical needs of the Lawndale community.
Come on.
Y'all is just in here. This was good. Y'all know we always love these talk backs. They always get deep. We're always leaving with a cliffhanger and we want to talk more, but we can't. We got to get back to work. So I just want to thank you all for joining, especially the ones that come week after week and participate in these. It's such a blessing. It allows the Holy Spirit to move as it should. Thank you, Taj, for bringing all of your wisdom and education and just vulnerability to the talk back. And we gonna wrap it up. I do want to let you guys know, last year we tried to do celebrations, like the end of the month celebrations with food and dance and music and things like that. We are not doing that this year, but we are having desserts delivered to each care team. So be on the lookout for that. It is strawberry banana pudding. Enjoy y'all desserts that Black folks have just it's gonna be so good. So enjoy that. I appreciate you all for joining